I mean, I might write like a stunning sex goddess, but I still do my dishes and walk my dog. Everybody has a sexual side to themselves, and I think one of the great parts about erotica and erotic audio is that it allows you to learn who that sexual self is if you're not already aware of it. And I think that's a really cool part about erotica and erotic audio, that you get to learn what you like and a part of who you are.
Hi, welcome to the Growth Mixtape Podcast, and I'm your host, Bob Mathers. We have one rule here. We're going to chase our curiosity way outside our comfort zones. The more uncomfortable and awkward, the better. We're going to talk to people you've never heard of doing jobs you didn't know existed. We're going to hear human stories about the things that connect us, what we can learn from one another, and what we can take away to apply to our own lives. These conversations might not seem to have a lot in common at first, but just like songs on a mixtape, they create something memorable and emotional. Today we talked to PrettyLynne. In case you hadn't guessed, that's not her real name. You see, Lynne writes and records erotic fiction, and for reasons we'll get into, she's asked that we keep her identity secret. Lynne describes herself as a Gen Xer in her second act who stumbled into the world of erotic fiction during a period of personal transition. What she found was freedom, a creative outlet that has helped her reconnect with herself, and as it turns out, a growing audience of women and men also hungry for connection. When I was introduced to Lynne through a mutual friend, I was excited to explore this idea that we all have sides of ourselves that we keep hidden for fear of what people will think. And yes, the opportunity to talk about this through the lens of soft porn is one I just could not pass up. But this conversation was so much more than that. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe letters to Penthouse from my youth, and if you don't know what that is, look it up, but please use Incognito mode. But much like Lynne's writing, this conversation was beautiful, vulnerable, and nuanced. Lynne opens up about how her writing has helped her better understand herself, be more confident, and find a creative voice she had lost. If you've ever felt stuck, like you have more to offer the world and you just need a place to start, this conversation is for you. As Lynne says, no feeling is final. Keep going, keep creating. Let yourself be surprised by what emerges. Please enjoy PrettyLynne. All right, Lynne. So welcome to the podcast. There's so much of this that is new to me. And part of the first thing is that we're going to keep your name and identity secret for reasons that we'll get into. So I'm going to call you Lynne, even though that's not your real name. And yeah, pretty excited about this.
Great. Me too.
Now, your nom de plume is PrettyLynne. Just before we get started, I'm curious where that came from.
Well, I can't say too much about that, or I would probably give some things away. But I will say that I chose the name for not at all this reason. So I chose it originally for an Instagram account that I wanted to use to follow a voice actor that I really admired. And then I wrote some things and under that name, and now I'm stuck with it. So that's how that got there.
Yeah, you built up a bit of a following and a brand, and now
Mhm.
it wasn't
Yeah.
overly thought through, I guess. Interesting. Yeah, that I can see how that would happen.
Yeah, when I started, I didn't anticipate doing any of this. This wasn't on my radar at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I often start off with a bit of an origin story, but I'm not sure how much we're allowed to know. So what do you think is important for us to know about sort of how you got here?
Okay. Well, I'll say a few things. So, I like to describe myself as a Gen X person in her second act. um,
Hmm.
and how I got here is an interesting, to me, story anyway, hopefully to you and your listeners. Uh, so, about 2 years ago, I discovered erotic audio. I just stumbled onto it, I think probably on Instagram. And I thought, oh, what is this? This is really, I've never heard anything like it. And the audio that I heard was describing a person who was, it was a voice artist talking through someone in their backyard, like feeling their body, appreciating themselves, and how can you make your body feel good? Like pretty tame stuff. But I still thought, oh, this is really interesting. So I started looking into it a little bit more, and I really liked it. And I was at the same time discovering that I was in perimenopause and experiencing, some hormonal fluctuations. And I was learning also about women's sexual desire, because that's not something I had really ever known about before. And one of the things that I learned was that it is, in many women, it's considered a responsive, or women experience what's considered responsive desire. So they respond to external stimuli. That's how they become like interested in having sex. It's not an internal motivation necessarily. So these things tied together for me in my mind. And I learned a lot about myself. I started listening to a lot of erotic audio, and I really liked some of it a lot. And then I started to think about, you know, could I write something like this? And I wasn't really interested in writing scripts, because that is a thing that a lot of people do. They write scripts for other people to perform. Um, and I didn't even really put a lot of thought into it. I sort of one night was feeling really miserable. I was going through a lot of things in my life, and some issues with family and some issues with my marriage and just like a whole bunch of stuff. And I thought to myself, I just need a distraction. Like, I need to not think about all this stuff anymore. So I started to write a story. And I didn't intend to do this, but what happened was I started to write a story based on a tiny bit of audio that my favorite voice artist put out. And just all he did was release a little bit on Instagram. And it was the setup was that someone met him in a hotel room, and he came out of the shower and found the person in his bed. So I kind of took it from there and imagined what the scene might look like between the two people. And I read it the next day, and I thought, okay, this might be something. So I sent it to him, and I asked him, I said, like, I wrote this. Is it okay if I use your material to put it out into the world? And he said, sure, go for it. So I did. I published it on Literotica, which, I mean, there's a moderation process, but you basically just post things there, and then they look at it to make sure it fits their agenda. And then, because I was so interested in audio, I thought I would record it at the same time. So I released the recording, me reading the story at the same time as I told everyone that the story was posted, and it got a big response. That was really fun. So I did it again. And then I kept having ideas, and I kept getting, not so much feedback, but just like people saying, oh, like, this is really good. You're really good at this. And I might be going into too much detail right now, but something else that happened at that time was that I got a lot of feedback on my voice. So the voice that I'm using to talk to you right now might not be exactly the same voice that I use for my audios, but people felt like it was very calming. I get soothing. I get sexy. So a lot of people really like my voice. So that was an encouragement to kind of keep doing it.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's just making some notes here because there's a few things I wanted to circle back on. Yeah, you mentioned that you're a Gen Xer in
Yeah.
your second act. Was there anything else kind of going on in your life besides perimenopause that made this something that that resonated with you in a way that probably wouldn't have 10 years ago or 15 years ago or even 5 years from now?
Uh, that's hard to say. I'm I'm not so sure. I think that things come to you and happen to you when they should, generally. And I think
Mm.
this kind of came to me at exactly the right time. I've always been a writer. I've written a lot of things over the years. I always meant to come back to writing, and for some reason this just really appealed to me, and it was the spark that I needed to come back to it. There are a lot of people who do what I do a lot, and but I would say that what I do is slightly unique because I really just write stories and record stories, um, and that's the purpose for me. Uh, if that makes sense. If you know a little bit about erotic audio, that would make sense, but you maybe don't. What a lot of people do in erotic audio, there's what's called role plays. So they will act out um, a sexual activity or a sexual act or a sexual scene. There's also what's called ramble faps or rambles, and that's where they record themselves masturbating and having orgasms. Um, there are collaborations between two voice artists, so they'll do that kind of thing. I don't really do any of that. I just read my stories.
Well, yeah. So I did, because I wasn't able to do the, the usual kind of research that I do on my guests about, where you grew up and
Yeah.
your background. Yeah. So I did some reading and I did some
Mhm.
listening, and I hadn't known about these sites before. And the first thing that struck me about the first couple of stories I read was how beautifully written they were. And I don't know what I was expecting or why that surprised me so much. There was a story you wrote about a woman sitting in a hospital beside her son who was dying or in a coma, and I was like, I was
Mhm.
crying before things progressed. That's not how it ended, but it got happier. Yeah, but I was just like, oh my god, this is actually really beautifully written, and hopefully that's not like it's not meant as an insult. I just had so little context for that. So what do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about this genre?
Oh, I think it is exactly the same as you had, that it's not high quality. This is pervasive right now. So romance, romantasy, dark fantasy books, these things are all really popular. There's a whole movement on TikTok called Book Talk. There are lots of apps that have sprung up. This is a big thing right now. And they're usually sort of looked at as like women's fiction. And the idea is that women's fiction is somehow less valuable than fiction. But that's not true. A lot of the writing is excellent. And on a site like Literotica, there's full novels are published there. Poetry is published there. If you spend a little time looking around, you're going to find something that you really like that you think is very high quality. Early on in this journey, I talked to a writer that I really admire. He's a writer and a voice artist that I admire. And I said to him, how do you know if it's good? And he said, if you like it, it's good. And so I kind of go with that. And I think that's true for a lot of other creators as well. So sometimes it's just a matter of finding your audience. So I would think that's the biggest misconception of that it's not going to be good quality or it's not going to be interesting. A lot of erotica is really emotional. It's not just descriptions of people having sex, it's all kinds of things that are happening. It's relationships, it's politics, it's all kinds of stuff. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, when you talk about writing for yourself, that really resonates. I mean, my regular listeners probably get tired of me talking about Rick Rubin, but he wrote a book called The Creative Act. And one of the things I take away from that book almost every day is that you put your audience last, and it flies in the face of everything that I do sort of for my work. But I think that's what kind of cripples people. Is like, what am I going to write? What are people going to like? What should I, how are they going to feel about this? And if you just write for
Mm.
yourself, whether it's music or writing or drawing, the people will find it. It will connect with the people that appreciate it because it's
Mhm.
authentically you in a way that anything else you write would never be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think you put out what you want to into the world, the audience is going to find it. And I think when people, I mean, we're trained from an early age to be dependent on feedback, right? We go to school, we get marks, we get told that you should do this better, you should do that better. We're put in sort of a categorization of how good we are at certain things. But when you're doing creative work, you're never going to be, first of all, you're never going to be as good as the people you look up to, or you're not never going to be. You're not going to be when you start. And so I think what you have to do is just try to do what's authentically you, just as you said, and what happens happens. As long as you're enjoying it. Like if it's become stressful, that's not good. But I mean, I'm still really enjoying this. So
Yeah, and obviously you've struck a chord because you've got lots of followers. And I was reading through the comments. People do talk about your voice. They love your voice. They love that, and you can tell that they appreciate how beautifully written it is. And you could write about anything.
mhm,
I mean, you could point that writing talent in any
mhm.
direction. Why is this so rewarding for you in ways that maybe writing about other stuff wouldn't be?
I think for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm in my midlife. I think we're very reflective at this time. I've had a major change in my life in the last couple of years. My marriage ended. Um, okay, to really get philosophical. So I once saw a sex therapist say, the way you show up to sex is the way you show up to life. And I think, how true is that? And when I'm writing, what I'm thinking about is relationships
Hmm.
and emotions and transformation and all that kind of stuff. And the sex is a lens. Like if you read enough of my stories, sometimes the sex isn't even that much. There's not even that much there. Sometimes it's the main event, sometimes it's not. And so I think it's just functions in the stories as like part of how this person is living their life and they're having an experience. I call them, I kind of have a tagline on all my stuff. I call them erotic encounters because I don't write long stories. There are some people who do. I don't tend to. I write shorter stories and really focus on one particular aspect of what's happening in that person's life. Part of a novel written that I'm a little afraid to look at and see if it's any good, but I may finish it at some point, but I may just start another one. That's a goal of mine, to finish a novel. Whether it ever sees the light of day or not, it doesn't really matter. My goal is to finish it. And yeah, I mean, I think over time the way I've written has changed a little bit, but right now this is really interesting to me, and I have a community of people that do the same kind of stuff, and it's just really satisfying right now.
I want to come back to that idea of judgment in a second. How that, because I know that's a
Mhm.
common theme that holds a lot of us back. I know it holds me back. But you just talked about how your writing has changed over time. And, my only parallel is the little bit of writing that I do on LinkedIn. It's the only time I really share my ideas with the world. And I do find that there used to be things that I said, oh, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that. Like there were all kinds of barriers that I put up around the things that I would talk about. And then over time, I've broken those down, and that's really helped me be more authentic and find a new, more connected audience. So, how is your writing changing? And are there things you're comfortable writing about now that you never thought you'd be writing about?
That's a great question. I think I remember I remember when I wrote the first story and I recorded it and I put it out, and then someone said to me, "You did such a good job of that." And I listened back and thought, "I cannot believe I'm saying these things out loud." That is no longer an issue for me. Um, no, I think so. That same writer that I referred to before, who I admire, who's a voice artist as well, and has a long history of writing erotica. He talked about the fact that if you write what turns you on, that's going to be the most authentic thing, right? So that's kind of what I do. There are lots of things that I'm not that interested in that other people are. I mean, there's a there's a sort of a meme about the fact that there's a porn for everything and there's an erotic audio for everything as well. And I think over time, I've just maybe gotten a little bolder, but also, again, sometimes, like I said, the sex isn't even that point of it. So, really, I'm still just writing about people having experiences, I guess.
Yeah. I wonder, when you talk about writing your book, and you did talk
Hmm.
about the first time that you wrote, because one of the things that I do think that holds a lot of people back is this fear of judgment. And it's not just judgment from others, but like it's the reason that I still can't bring myself. You can see behind me, I've got two guitars hanging on the wall. I can't write a
Hmm.
frickin' song to save my life because I write two lines of it and I look at it. Yeah, that's shit. That's not as good as anything Tom Petty or Johnny Cash ever wrote. So I just sort of throw it away and I get really frustrated. So it's not just about what will other people think, but it's just, overcoming whatever kind of standards I've built up in my head. And I listen to the greatest songwriters in the world. I don't know what makes me think that I'm going to crank one of these things out my first time. But is that ever something that you've struggled with? And why is it different for writing an audio compared to a book?
Oh, 100% I've struggled with that. I don't do it often, but sometimes I do when I'm feeling a little wobbly about something. I'll have someone read it for me and just say, like, is this okay? Give me a little feedback if I need it. A lot of what I do is about learning to trust my own judgment. So over my life, I've made lots of decisions that have been smart and lots of stupid ones. Okay. At some point, I decided I didn't know what I was doing. And I think I am learning to trust myself. And this is a method through which I'm doing that. So if I feel like it's good, I'm going to put it out. Now, when you said you struggle to write a song because you're not going to write anything like Tom Petty ever did, well, you don't know that because Tom Petty's initial songs never saw the light of day, probably. But the other thing is, Tom Petty already exists, but you don't, right? So write it for yourself. You can find satisfaction in that by letting yourself try. So my self-judgment is still sometimes an issue for me, but it's something I'm working on because I think it's important to learn how to trust myself and know when something's good. And I have an internal knowing. I have an audio on my Reddit account. It's called Listen to the Voice Inside. And I just threw it out there one day because I wanted to talk to people. It's safe for work. It's just like me talking about listening to yourself, listening to the voice inside you to understand that what you're doing is the right thing, that your body knows when you're not doing the right thing and your body knows when you are doing the right thing. And if you can listen to that voice, then you'll make better decisions. That's what I also try to do for writing.
Hey, it's Bob, and I'm taking the Growth Mixtape on the road in a series of keynote speeches inspired by the stories of my amazing guests. At their core, these signature talks are about how to get you and your teams off autopilot and stop settling for small incremental improvements. This isn't going to come from spewing business advice. My podcast is full of people that have done incredible things, and every one of them struggles with self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and the crippling fear of judgment that holds so many of us back. They've also found ways through it by rediscovering their creativity, their curiosity, and the confidence to do scary things. Imagine the power of bringing these vulnerable stories to life, live and on stage, to help you and your teams hit your targets, find your voice, and be the rock stars you are. Book me for your next event at bobmathers.ca. Now back to the show. How has your creative process changed since you started? Because I'm always really interested when I talk to people who I admire for their creativity, how they can sometimes summon it, but sometimes it's got to be, at a certain time of day and a certain kind of mood. Or can you just kind of conjure this up on demand? And how has that changed over time?
Well, I don't understand how this works for me exactly. And that's probably part of why it's worked so well this time because I've let it happen. So I write on my phone a lot, actually. So I'm not even sitting down and typing in a particular place. I don't have any kind of routine. I just write when I feel like it. But I participate in this community challenge, creative community challenge sometimes. And what happens is this creator gives a series of tags and you kind of draw one. So I drew the tag toxic. And I describe myself as kind of as a romantic. I write more romantic things. So I thought toxic. Oh crap! I don't really like toxic. Doesn't turn me on. Toxic doesn't do anything for me. I'm not interested in toxic relationships. So what am I supposed to do here? And then I was just thinking about it. Bob, can I swear on your podcast?
Please do.
Okay,
Bring it
good.
on.
I was thinking about it. I was walking around and this line came to me, I can't fucking stay away from you. And I thought, okay, that's something. Where does that go? And this is the case with a lot of the stories. There's just something that comes to me. There's a detail, there's a sentence, something comes to me, and I just kind of grab it and let it happen from there. It would be very hard to describe any other way. It's like a fun kind of alchemy that I get to participate in.
When those things happen during the day, like do you have a way of capturing them in the moment?
Sometimes I just write it down.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just think about it a little bit. Sometimes I'll be writing something and I'll run into a problem. Like I know that this next bit isn't going to work. So I just let it percolate, and it's almost like the program in the back is running while the rest of it is going, and then it would come to me. This is what you need to do. So, and that's often what happens. And I'll admit I talk to myself on walks. Or if I'm doing my dishes, I'll be doing my dishes and then suddenly I'll think, oh no, the character should say it like that. So that's kind of how that works for me.
I talk to myself all the time on walks, and I walk fairly early in the morning. So sometimes it's dark out.
Hmm.
And so I'm wandering the streets of downtown in the town I live in or through the forest. And every once in a while, I'll walk past people, and I'm sure they hear me muttering to myself. But I'm never sort of reciting erotic stories to myself. I wonder how the looks would change if I was reading or saying out loud some of the things that you had running through your mind.
Yeah, I don't really say that stuff out loud.
Are most of your listeners men or women? What's that split like?
Oh, I think it's probably fairly even for me actually,
Hmm.
for listeners. So one of the things that I do that's slightly different from how many people write is I pare down the story so there are a lot fewer details than other people might write. So you don't know what the characters look like often. You don't know what age is there. You often don't know how they met. You might get an inkling about something that has happened with between them, but sometimes you don't even know too much about that. So I imply a few things, and then I like to let the readers really fill in the information for themselves. So some of the stories that I've written have really appealed to women who have seen themselves as the character, the
Hmm.
main female character. And then lots of men appreciate the stories as well for emotional reasons, for, you know, the sex, whatever it is they like. They comment on all kinds of things. Um, so yeah, I think it's a fairly even split for me actually.
I wonder, so you mentioned you're divorced. At what point do you introduce this side of you? Is it a date one thing? Is it a date three thing? Because that's gonna change everything on a dime. Or maybe it won't. I don't know. How do you think about that?
It could. I think it could. I That's a that's a good question. I think two things. Number one is I'm not interested in dating anyone who would not be into this, who would judge me for it, right?
Okay.
So that would be a requirement. Like if you somehow think poorly of me because this is what it's something that I do in my spare time, well, then I'm not interested in spending time with you. Um, I think the second thing I want to say is it could potentially change someone's view in terms of what they think I am like as a sexual human being. I mean, I might write like a stunning sex goddess, but I still do my dishes and walk my dog. Right? Like you're still a regular person. So and I think to go back to that quote that I said before about the way you show up to sex is the way you show up to life. You know, everybody has a sexual side to themselves. And I think one of the great parts about erotica and erotic audio is that it allows you to learn who that sexual self is if you're not already aware of it. There are many, 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 many people who are not aware of it. The number one thing you read in comments and news stories, on Reddit, all over the place is like, I never knew I liked this particular thing, or I didn't know I liked to be spoken to this way, or I didn't know that I was interested in, you know, this activity or this kind of person or this accent or whatever. Like people learn a lot about themselves, and I think that's a really cool part about erotica and erotic audio, that you get to learn what you like and a part of who you are. And I think the other thing that's really cool about it is, you know, accepting that that's a part of you that you don't have to be ashamed of. Like, this is fine. This is great. Like, sex is fun and
Hmm.
it's a good activity for people to do. And it's an amazing way to connect with someone else. And, you know, it's an integral part of a relationship and blah, blah, blah. There's lots of reasons why it shouldn't be shameful. And so, especially I think for women, because typically women, especially now sometimes, and we're getting some puritanical messaging coming from certain places, um, women need to feel comfortable and safe in expressing themselves that way. So, this is a great way to do that.
Yeah, that is the thing that I guess occurred to me as I was going through um, the Literotica website is that the thing that people might initially find there
Hmm.
will probably change. Like what resonates, like, oh, well, I guess I'll go test this. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. This seems a little, oh, well, I like that. And they sort of find their own path through this world. Where else are they going to get a chance to do that? I mean, I guess if they find themselves a partner and they're in a great relationship, they can explore that together. But I can see that being an option for a lot of people.
Yeah, this is a totally, totally safe way to do that for yourself. And one of the great things is about the way that people produce erotic audio is we tag everything that we make so you can see exactly what's in what you're about to listen to. So right away, if there's something that does not appeal to you, you don't have to, you can skip it. It's fine. You don't have to listen to it. And if you are willing to try something new and you want to, then, great, do that. It's a matter of taking care of yourself and being aware of what you're about to listen to. And, if you have something that you might find triggering, staying away from that. But otherwise, it's a totally safe way to try out something new. So,
Yeah, you mentioned this idea that there shouldn't be kind of shame and judgment around it, and yet you're on this podcast. We're not using your real name. We can't talk about what you do for a living. So, like, how do you think about that? It does
Mhm.
seem like we should be further along than this because I read your writing. Like I said, it is beautiful. It's not there's no animals, it's no hardcore stuff, there's nothing offside, it's actually
Yeah.
beautifully written. How do you think about the fact that you've gotta kinda keep this side of yourself hidden?
Well, I choose to keep this side of myself hidden. I think that's the difference. I could be open about it. There are many people who are. Um, I choose to do that partially because of the work that I do, and I think that it could be it could just be difficult for my employer, slightly. Um, I don't have any shame in what I'm doing. I don't feel bad about it. If I trust somebody, will talk about it. I talk about it with lots of people. I will say partially the reason it's important to me to be anonymous right now is because you're on the internet. There are people, all kinds of people who I don't know, also on the internet, and you have to be a little careful, right?
You talked earlier about how people can learn a lot about themselves by kind of exploring this in a safe place. I'd love to know what you've learned about yourself since you started doing this.
Well, as I talked about earlier, I definitely learned about a lot about how the desire and arousal worked for me. I learned I I learned that I'm a confirmed romantic. I always thought I was. But I definitely learned about the things that appeal to me have an emotional component to them. Um, it's often an established relationship situation that appeals to me. I mean, I didn't learn any big surprising new sex positions that I was interested in, for example, but you know, uh,
It's not too late. There's still time.
listen, I'm open. I think the more, I mean, more what I've learned about myself is just like I said, to trust my own judgment, to allow myself to be creative, to have some confidence in what I'm doing, to take some pride in it. It's more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I do love that. Again, another thing that I just can't get out of my head from Rick Rubin is this idea that it might not be possible to know who you are without first expressing it, and how the act of creating and putting your voice out there helps you build on that. And and find a voice, like you said, and a voice and a confidence that you didn't know you had. So that's something that, I mean, you said you've written most of your life. I've never really created or written anything until the last couple of years, and I can't believe what a difference that's made. So it's just so inspiring to hear how you've taken that on.
Yeah, I think it's been an amazing journey for me actually, and I'm coming up to close to a year since the first thing I put out. Um, it's an it's a realm in which people come and go a lot. Like people are getting into it, they're really interested in it, but life takes over. They get busy. They run out of time. Um, they don't feel like it's fun. It becomes stressful, so they leave. I don't see that happening anytime soon for me because I'm still enjoying it. I have projects coming up with other people that I enjoy working with, which is cool, and um, it's been great. And like you said, it's finding your voice, and it's time to like I said, I'm in my second act. Like time to find your voice.
Well, yeah, certainly I suspect we're around the same age, and I certainly feel that, I don't know, sense of urgency. Like Like, what are you waiting for?
Absolutely. There's a saying, and I forget right now. I think it's George Eliot. It's never too late to be what you might have been.
God, I love that. The one thing you sort of alluded to, but we didn't touch on much is feedback. How do you handle feedback? I mean, the comments that I read were just glowing, um, like just about your voice, about your writing. Just a lot of fans, clearly. Have you ever gotten really harsh feedback that's been hard to accept? How do you deal with that?
No, to be honest, I really haven't. The funniest thing that happens is I sometimes will get because I don't really write too much that's simple. I don't really write like a happily ever after love story, but I do publish on Literotica in the romance category quite a bit. So I'll get this comment that says, "Not a romance." I've run into that a few times where I think that there is in fact a romance there. There's a relationship there, but the reader doesn't see that. No, I don't tend to get. I haven't really gotten a lot of harsh feedback.
Well, that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. On the internet, everyone feels like they can say everything. I do get funny direct messages sometimes. So one of the things that happens because I write a lot of my stories in first and second person, but I write from the I perspective, right? So I am inhabiting the character, the female main character, and so people think they know something about me because of what they've read. So one of my one of my stories is about a dominant female character or member of a relationship, and my favorite DM that I ever got from anybody just said "mommy," which just kills me because I don't know. That must work for that guy.
Right.
That's more of the feedback that I get.
No kidding. Well, yeah, actually one of the first things when I first went on Literotica for the first time and I looked up your profile, it doesn't say much about you, but it said, despite the fact that I often write in the first person, I'm not recounting my own experience. All stories are works of fiction. And I'm curious why that was important for you to put in your profile.
Just for exactly that reason,
Mm,
because you can't. I am writing characters. I'm
right.
writing characters that are having experiences that you know, they're not my experiences. Like I'm imagining these things. So I wanted to just put that right out there so people could know that if they're reading something, I mean, obviously there are pieces of me in
Right.
every one of these stories. That's how writing works, but it's not me talking and it's not my experiences that you're reading about or listening to. So I just wanted to be very clear so that that appears most places that I post
Okay.
things. Hmm.
Yeah, when just coming back to that question I asked you about dating, I guess I wasn't thinking that people would be judgmental if they found out about it. I thought maybe
Hmm.
they'd be thinking about like, "Oh, I've hit the jackpot here. Like this is
Well, maybe so.
yeah." Uh,
That would remain to be seen, I guess.
yeah, right, of course. Here's a question that I stole from, I don't know, probably Tim Ferriss or something. I love the question. If you had a giant billboard and could put anything on it, like a picture, a meme, a saying, and you could put it out in the world for millions of people to see, what would be on that billboard?
This is an easy answer for me. So there's a really important quote by Rainer Maria Rilke, and he wrote the letters. He's very famous for letters to a young poet, but he wrote a lot of poems. A German poet, and he wrote a poem called "Go to the Limits of Your Longing," and there are lines in it that are pretty well known, and it says, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. No feeling is final. Just keep going." So for me, no feeling is final is an important thing to remember, right? As you go. So things always change.
Man, you're after about 50 guests, you're the first guest that I've ever asked that question of. And I don't know if anyone's going to be able to top that answer. That is a friggin' beautiful quote. I would have no problem staring at that billboard all day long.
It may not surprise you that I consume a lot of
I
literature and
know.
poetry.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of literary references in here that, again, I'm not surprised, but I wasn't expecting. So I want to ask you sort of what you're most excited about next. One thing just quickly, is there like, do you ever imagine making a living from this? Is that, I mean, maybe that's not important to you, but
It's not important to me. A lot of people do. Like it's very, very common to start in this area, and then you build up a bit of a following, and then you start a Patreon, and so people would pay for monthly access to your work. That's probably not something I'm interested in doing. But 2 years ago, I would not have said I would do this. So
right.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't want to discount anything. But I think right now this is functioning in a specific way for me. It fits into my life well. So, and it's still enjoyable. Once you start having to earn money, then you're also accountable to other people, right? So if I had to write scripts for someone else, that I would find that difficult. I think I'm not sure it would come to me in exactly the same way that it's happening right now. So
Yeah. Nothing like turning your passion into a business is a surefire way to suck every part that you enjoy of it right out of it, right?
It yeah, it often kills it. No, that's not that's just me.
Right.
Lots of people
Yeah.
are very successful at it, so you go, guys.
No kidding.
But I don't foresee that for myself at this point.
What are you excited about, though, if you look out over the next year in terms of this part of your life? What are you most excited about?
I think just continuing kind of in the vein that I'm going. Like I said, would really like to finish. I'd like to write and finish a novel, whether it's the one have mostly completed or start a new one. I have an idea for a new one as well, so I'd like to do that. And so at some point that may kind of take over from this. I don't know. So it's interesting, right? There are metrics. There are metrics in anything. The metrics in this world on Literotica, people rate your stories. On Reddit, people upvote your things. It's numbers of listens. That's all kinds of things, and all that stuff, comes into your mind and you think about it. But really, what I enjoy are the comments from people that I get. So I have comments like I got on that story that you referenced. There was a comment about how it was so reminiscent of this person's experience with his wife that he found it painful and almost difficult to finish. And I really feel for people who had that experience, but I also thought, oh yeah, like that felt true to that reader. And those are the kinds of comments that I really enjoy. People who've really found something in the story for themselves and can relate to it, and it feels true to them. That's what I like. So that's more what I measure. So I'm excited to keep doing that.
And if people are curious and want to check you out, where can they find you?
So they can find me on Reddit. My username is PrettyLynne23. My username is PrettyLynne on Literotica, so you just have to search me so they can see it from the podcast. So those are two places that you can find my content.
I can't thank you enough for this, Lynne. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit like your writing where I didn't know what to expect, or I probably had some preconceived notions, and it was so much richer and more beautiful than I was expecting. It's a lot like this conversation.
Oh.
It's just been, I've just loved it. And I've got so many more questions.
I was going to say, I could talk about this
I
forever.
know. It's just been, God, one of my favorite conversations ever. I can't thank you enough.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed it too.
The Growth Mixtape podcast with Bob Mathers is produced by Bespoke Projects. Music by Je-m'appelle Walter Cronkite. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow and rate us. When you do this, it helps to raise our podcast profile so that more people can find us. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn using the link in the show notes.